In this video, I'm going to show you how to lay large format tile in a bathroom. I'll go over the more common cuts. I will show you the proper way to spread thin set, which is very important when you're laying large tile. I'm also going to go over the tile leveling systems that everybody seems to be pushing now and tell you whether or not I think they're worth it. To see how to get to this point, check out my video on how to install backerboard. Large format tile needs a pretty flat floor to work, so check for any humps or dips with a level or something with a flat edge so that you can fix them with a leveling compound before you start. And if it's really bad, you might want to reconsider using a large format tile and go with something smaller. The first thing we need to do is cut the door jamb so the tile can slide under it. For this, I use a Rockwell oscillating tool, but you can also use a flat jamb saw if you want a cheaper option. Remove the door if it opens into the room that you're working in. To get the correct height, set a piece of tile on a piece of cardboard and use that as a guide for your cutting. If you have door casing and baseboard already on, notch out an inch or so into the baseboard at the same height of your door casing. This will make it a lot easier when you go to set the tile, and it's going to be covered by the base shoe. Get a measurement from slightly under each side of your door casing so the transition piece will slide under. I use Schluter systems, and it makes a nice clean flush transition. You can get any color that you want, and you can cut them very easily with a hacksaw, grinder, or a chop saw. Use a chalk line or a pencil on the straight edge to mark the center of your room. Do a quick check to see if you need to line up the edge of your tile or the center of the tile with the center line that you've marked. You want to make sure that you don't end up with a tiny sliver at the end. You'll want to keep it to about 1/2 to 3/4 of a tile to be safe. For this floor, I'm using a brick pattern. Now, most tile manufacturers do not recommend this pattern for the 12 by 24 tiles. It's due to the unavoidable cupping some tile experiences during the manufacturing process. So offsetting your tile in halves makes it very hard, if not impossible, to avoid lippage, which is the ups and downs where the tiles meet, and it's not the smooth, flush floor that we all want. If your subfloor is flat and you want to lay in a brick pattern, it is possible. Just check your tiles first by laying them completely flat on a surface like a countertop and checking to see if all sides are making contact, and then flip the tile over and check that side as well. If it's got some cupping, you're better off laying in a staggered pattern and breaking it into thirds. So for a 12 by 24 tile, you'd offset each row by 8 inches. For small rooms, I begin laying out the tile and I work my way to the back of the room. For larger rooms, I measure from my center line on both sides of the room and I create a new line where I want to start my first row. The easiest way to figure out the measurement for the first row is to lay a straight line from the middle like I did earlier and then measure from the front edge of the tile to the center line. The majority of large format tiles are porcelain and are easiest to cut with a wet saw. You can use some type of score and snap tools that are out there, but they tend to work best with ceramic, but I still prefer a wet saw. You'll also need a grinder with a cutting blade made for the type of tile that you're using. You can get cheap grinder blades, but I would recommend spending a little more for a good one, especially if you're using porcelain. I use 1/8 inch spacers. You can go up to 1/4, but you can't go smaller for this size of tile. And keep in mind that grout is the hardest part of a tile floor to clean, so smaller grout lines makes it easier to maintain. I cut the register holes after I've laid everything out to the back wall, but the toilet flange has to be cut as you go so that the tile will lay flat. Now, slow and steady is the key when cutting circles with a grinder. And be sure to wear eye protection because you will almost guarantee tile chips flying in your eyes if you don't. A lot of bathtubs aren't completely straight at the bottom, so measure each end to get a good fit. And then I leave about 1/8 of an inch gap that I fill with siliconized grout caulk. When you're cutting out your toilet flange, keep in mind that you have some room for error here, and it doesn't have to be a perfect circle. You can measure the base of your toilet and see how much play you have. In my case, I could have cut the straight lines that I made and just skipped the round cutting altogether, but good round cuts are a source of pride around job sites, so I couldn't get caught taking the easy way out. When the tile ends in the middle of a cutout, mark the side and top and then transfer that line to the next tile. If the cutout is in the middle, you'll have to use a tape measure to get your mark. To notch out of the middle edge, use your wet saw for each side and then your grinder to finish it off. Remember to go slow with the grinder so you don't break the tile. If you get really unlucky and your cutout is in the dead center of a tile, in that case you'll have to use the grinder. But try not to overcut. You can always take a little bit more off, but you can't put it back. I'd recommend leaving the last row that meets the doorway out until everything is completely set. This needs to be a very tight cut, and it's very likely that the distance is going to change a little bit after you set the tiles. When you cut around a door jamb, it ends up looking like a step. This is why it's very helpful to cut out some of the baseboard so you can make sure everything is covered up. You don't want to have any grout holes filled around your doors that are visible. If you're anything like me, that little mistake will haunt your dreams and fill you with regret. So if you mess up, don't settle, just get another tile and try again. It'll be worth it. Tile leveling systems have become very popular with the increased popularity of these large format tiles. And that can be a great way to guarantee a completely flat floor, but there are some problems. And one of them is they're expensive. A few dollars compared to $100 or more to do a medium-sized room is a big difference if you're not using them a lot. And another problem is they take a little time to get the hang of, and they're not as easy as they look. So if you're new at setting tile, you really need to get the basics down before you try to lay that perfect floor. And the biggest issue I have is their potential to cause hollow spots when they're used improperly. They can only be used when your floor is completely flat, and they cannot be used to correct subfloor issues. So basically, I like them for pros that use them correctly and are wanting to take their tiling to the next level, but I think they're a bad idea for beginners. But if you think you can handle it, I'll put a link in the description with my favorites for price and for type. Be sure to get a mortar that works for your tile type. I recommend getting a pre-mixed mortar with the additive already in it and not using this liquid additive like I'm using. Like I've said in all my videos that show me using this, I bought about 50 jugs of this stuff when it was on sale, and I only use it on my personal projects and when I'm putting down tile backer just to get rid of it. It causes the mortar to dry way too fast and it smells terrible. The tile I'm using requires a 1/2-inch notch trowel. The bigger the tile, the bigger the notches need to be. And I got this one on Amazon for about $7, and so far I like it better than ones that cost twice as much at Lowe's and Home Depot, so I'll add the link to the description. The mixing requirements vary with different brand types, so be sure to mix your mortar according to the instructions. And after you initially mix it, most require a few minutes to activate, and then it needs to be mixed again. And during this activation, the mortar will get slightly thicker. So if you're unsure about consistency, keep that in mind. So once you let it set, you can no longer add water to your mix. It will ruin its ability to effectively bond the tile. And the same thing applies when you're laying it out. If the mortar is drying out faster than you can use it, it's best to throw it out and just start with small batches to get a feel for how much you need. Remove a couple rows at a time when you're laying, and be sure to place the tile in a way that helps you know where they belong. It's easy to get confused when you start moving stuff around. Probably the most important part of the entire tiling process is how you trowel the mortar. Your natural method is going to be to swirl it around because that's just the way your arm naturally moves. And it's fine to do that as you're putting it down, as long as you make the final pass with straight grooves. And if you need proof as to why this is important, I've linked a video by the National Tile Contractors Association, and they demonstrate how much can go wrong if you do it the incorrect way. When you set the tile, place it down so that the edges of the tile that you're setting touch the previous row, and then pull it back slightly while applying pressure to compress the ridges you've created with your trowel. This method, referred to as back buttering, is also recommended on larger tile to help ensure that the maximum amount of mortar contact is made. Keep a damp cloth or a sponge close by to wipe up any mortar that you may get on your tile. It's a lot easier to get it while it's wet. Remember, as long as you take your time and avoid skipping important steps, tiling a floor is not very difficult. Just remember, there's a lot of opinions out there on the best ways to do everything. Just make sure you're not going against the manufacturer's instructions. If you have any tips or helpful suggestions, please leave a comment. Now it's ready to grout, and I normally wait until I get a little further in the room to avoid spilling something on it. I'll post the video after I do it, and I'll add a link here when it's done. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel to see detailed videos on everything related to construction and renovation. I have quite a few in the process of being made and will be posted soon. And thanks for watching, and good luck with your tile.